Hi, I'm Andrew from Parlogram, and a few weeks ago we looked at some Beatles lyrics that don't really make much sense today. But after that went out, a lot of you got in touch in the comments with something slightly different. Lines you'd been hearing completely wrong for years. And some of them are so convincing that even when you know the correct line, it still doesn't sound quite right. So in this video, we're going to look at a few more. Some that don't quite translate anymore, and some that may never have meant what we thought in the first place. Let's start with one that came up again and again. In Penny Lane, the line is 4 a fish and finger pies, but many people have always heard 4 a fish and finger pie, which sounds perfectly logical, except that's not what Paul is singing. And it doesn't stop there. In the same song, the banker is said to be wearing a mac in the pouring rain. But quite a few people have heard that as wearing a mask, which in fairness makes just as much sense now. And sometimes it wasn't just listeners getting these lines wrong. When Bob Dylan first heard I Want to Hold Your Hand, he thought they were singing I Get High instead of I Can't Hide.
I can hide, I can hide.
And it was only later when he met them that he realised he'd misheard it. And then there are others where the mishearing becomes almost more memorable than the original. In Penny Lane, there's another one. The line is, a pretty nurse is selling poppies from a tray. But quite a few people heard that as selling puppies from a tray. In Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, the line the girl with kaleidoscope eyes has often been heard as the girl with colitis goes by, which obviously takes the line in a very different direction. And of course, some people will say that they've always known what these lines meant. But when these records first came out, there was no easy way of checking the lyrics. So in a lot of cases, you were just going with whatever you thought you heard. And there are plenty of other examples where the meaning is completely clear once you know the context.
Keeps a 10-bob note up his nose.
In Mean Mr. Mustard, for example, we're told that he keeps a 10-bob note up his nose. Bob was slang for shilling, a coin worth 12 old pennies, used before decimalisation in 1971. So 10 bob simply means 10 shillings. The character itself was inspired by a newspaper story John had read about a man so mean that he would even shave in the dark to save money. In I'm So Tired, John sings,
And cursed Sir Walter Raleigh, he was such a stupid get.
The word get is actually git, an insult meaning someone unpleasant or a bit of an idiot. Lennon's Liverpool accent makes it sound like get. And Sir Walter Raleigh was often associated with introducing tobacco to England. So the line is really a small, slightly irritated joke. Lennon blaming him for the existence of cigarettes in the first place. And then there are things that would have been completely normal at the time, but not so much nowadays.
I could be handy mending a fuse when your lights have gone.
Which basically meant fixing a blown fuse. Just an everyday household job back then, though probably not something as many people would feel confident doing today. In Paperback Writer, Paul describes writing a story for the Daily Mail. The paper still exists, of course, though most people will know it in a very different way now. In Savoy Truffle, George lists a series of sweets.
Cream tangerine, Montelimore, a ginger sling with a pineapple heart. Coffee dessert, yes, you know it's good news.
Which were taken from a box of Good News chocolates. That would have been recognisable at the time, but without that context, it just sounds like a random list of words. And sometimes it isn't the words themselves that are unfamiliar, it's the meaning behind them.
Norwegian wood. No, this bird has flown. Take 3.
Are we on?
In Norwegian Wood, for example, the title can sound like it's referring to a place, but it doesn't. In 1965, Norwegian wood meant the cheap pine panelling you'd find in modern apartments. So the song is really describing the interior of a room, not a forest somewhere in Norway. And then there are lines that sound as though they should mean something, but don't. In Sun King, for example, there's a section that sounds vaguely like a real language, but it isn't real language at all.
Mondo paparazzi, mi amore, circa perdi il parasol.
Lennon was simply playing with the sound of words, mixing together fragments and inventing others entirely. He would often do this using placeholder words until something better came along.
Something in the way she moves. Just say whatever comes in your head each time. Attracts me like a cauliflower until you get the word in.
In I Am the Walrus, he fills the song with lines that sound as though they should mean something.
Yellow man of custard, dripping from a dead dog's eye.
Some of those come from old playground rhymes he remembered from childhood. So phrases like this aren't meant to be translated or decoded. They're there purely for their rhythm and feel. Interestingly, quite a few of the lines we've looked at come from John's songs. His writing often leads more into wordplay and sometimes deliberate obscure phrasing. Whereas Paul's tend to be more direct, even when he's describing something very specific. And once you start looking at it this way, you realize just how much of the Beatles' writing is tied to the time and place it came from. Everyday language, cultural references, even the small details that would have been completely obvious at the time, but can feel unfamiliar now. And judging by the comments on the last video, there are still plenty more of these to go at. I'll be back at the weekend with more Beatles stories. But that's all for this one, so I'll say bye for now, and thanks for watching.
Great!